Hi, I'm Bill Ritchie. I got a message online from someone who bought the Galleon Halfwood press. It's a 9-inch wide bed, and she wondered how she could use a Matboard printing plate on this press. And I happen to have a piece of Matboard, actually a cutout from a mat. So the edges, because it's a bevel-edged mat, the edges are already beveled. However, it's just a little tiny bit too wide. And so I'm going to show you how to cut a beveled edge, in case you don't have a piece of Matboard that's a cutout window from a Matboard. I can cut off 1/4 of an inch just to give it a little more space. It's a little tricky if you haven't ever cut a mat before with a mat knife, plain old utility knife. It's a little bit tricky, a little bit dangerous too, so be warned that it's easy to cut yourself. So I wouldn't recommend it if you're a raw beginner. I'd recommend that you get a regular mat cutter to do that with. But my blade is fairly sharp, but not sharp enough, and I'm holding the knife at an angle right up against the straight edge, and the straight edge has a cork back, so the cork back helps it to prevent it from slipping. Don't try to use too much force. If you use more force, you lose control. There. Now my plate will fit a little bit better, and it has that nice beveled edge which will help it go through the press a little more easily. The next thing I need to do, and I'm going to use a kind of what you would call in copper plate printmaking a drypoint. That means that there's going to be an edge that holds ink. To get that edge, I'll be using the same angle of making the lines on the plate. But before I do that, I'm going to give it a coat of varnish. It's going to take at least 2 coats of polyurethane. This happens to be the varnish brand of polyurethane, and it's a water wash-up. So that means that after I brush it on, I can wash my brush in water. Also, there are no fumes in this material. I'll coat one side, I'll let that dry, then I'll coat the other side, and then I'll repeat it, so I have a total of 2 coats on each side. The Matboard has to be sealed because later we'll be applying ink and dampened paper, and with those kinds of treatments this Matboard would probably warp and go all to pieces. I learned this from an artist from California. She was a guest by the Seattle Print Arts. That seals the plate. It dries fast. This brand of polyurethane brags about how fast the drying time is, and it's true. And as I said, this is water wash-up, so I'll take a break now and go wash my brush and be back to give it more coats and continue building up the plate. Okay, it's dry, and you notice how can you tell it's warped already? That's why we have to coat both sides. It took about 10 minutes for it to dry. Nice and dry now, flat, coated both sides of it. And by the way, I ran out of the varnish brand of polyurethane, so I went to the store, and turned out they didn't carry that brand, but they did carry another kind. This one's made by Minwax, and it's called polyacrylic, and it's an easy water wash-up, so probably the same thing. And while I was working, I began to think about what am I going to do with this project, and I decided to do a variation on the cover of my interactive sketchbook, Vladimir's Story sketchbook, which is a 124-page sketchbook that I put on Lulu, and I'm inviting people to illustrate it. Well, I have this design on the cover that I like very much, so I thought I'll plan it around that design. So I sent for color copies of the design itself, and I'm planning to put that oval in the plate around here somewhere, maybe some lettering in the bottom. And I made a device to tear out these pieces when I get to that stage out of galvanized steel. So it's an oval that an ellipse that fits right over, and I'll be able to tear those designs out. I'll demonstrate that when I get to that point. But now I need to start working on this plate.